one day, we were in class. I was in band at the time, and the classroom phone rang. And the teacher went and he answered the phone. He got really serious. He got this really concerned, shocked look on his face, and he hung it up and he turned to us and he said, "Everybody sit down, be quiet. The bell's going to ring in a couple minutes. You're going to stay seated." And then he went over to the doors and he locked them. And we were just like, oh shit, what is happening? And at first some of us were like, well, is it a bomb threat? Because we used to get bomb threats all the time, but then we realized that doesn't make sense because when we get a bomb threat, they evacuate us. And then we're like, is there some type of killer in the school? Is there a weather alert? Is there a terrorist attack? And none of us knew anything. The teacher wouldn't answer any questions. He was told not to. And the bell rang. We all stayed seated and we sat there for a really, really long time. And then the next bell rang, which means a whole other class period had passed. And still he said, "Stay seated." And I can't tell you how long we were trapped in this room and nobody was telling us what was going on. We're all getting really scared and panicking because we had never had a situation like this, and we had practiced so many drills, if there's a bomb, we all go to the band lot. If there's a tornado, we all go to the basement. If there's a fire, we take these exits on this side. We always had a plan, and this was just something that we had never planned and nobody was telling us anything. So eventually they're texting their parents and calling their parents and they're saying, "Do you know anything about this?" And the parents are all freaking out, and now it's like an ordeal. Some of the parents started listening to the police scanners, and it was getting back to us that there were ambulances outside of our school, and we're just like, and at this point, a lot of us are panicking because we think there's some type of shooter or something, because that makes sense. Like, okay, the doors are locked. They're telling us to be quiet. They're telling us not to move. They're telling us not to leave. There's ambulances outside. And finally, they just open the doors and let us go. And they wouldn't tell us anything still. So we're just like, okay, we just sat in this classroom for like hours. There's ambulances outside of our school and you're just gonna classroom for like hours. There's ambulances outside of our school and you're just gonna let us go to our next class? So you can probably tell by the title of this video what happened. A girl died in class during school hours. And here's the story on that. So earlier in that day, around like first, second period, somebody sold her a bunch of Oxycontins. She, during school, took all of them. She ended up going to her 7th period class at 3rd period, and she walked in and the teacher was like, "Honey, what are you doing here?" And she said, "Oh, I'm here for class." And the teacher was like, "You're not here until later, honey. It's only 3rd period." And I wasn't here for this, but supposedly when she walked away, she said to somebody else, "Oh, she's on something," or "She's drunk," or something. But it was obvious that she was on something. So she went a couple classes later and she put her head down on the desk. She was sleeping, and she was just kind of one of those students who, you know, showed up late and slept in class. Obviously didn't show a ton of interest in her. He was an amazing teacher. He was a caring teacher, but he didn't wake her up. For I don't know what reason it was. I don't know if he just thought, you know, you can only try so hard to make somebody interested in class. I don't know if he figured, you know what, she could really use the sleep, just let her nap. But that class was over and the bell rang and everybody got up, but she stayed seated laying on her desk like this with her head down, and she wasn't getting up. So somebody who was sitting next to her nudged her and was like, "Hey, wake up, class is over." And she didn't move, and then she nudged her a little harder to wake her up, and that is when her arm fell completely limp to the side of the desk. So obviously at this point, people start panicking. They roll her over and she is completely blue. I don't know how long she was out. I don't know how long she wasn't breathing, but she had completely OD'd and had not been receiving oxygen for enough time to turn her blue. That is when the ambulances were called. That is when the school was put on lockdown. She was taken out, obviously, and she died that day.
When I was in middle school, I got bullied really bad. People just picked on me. And it stayed like that for about 3 years. I was bullied mercilessly. I was called names and stuff got thrown at me, and people would write mean names on the bathroom walls and call me horrible stuff. And it got to the point where it got physical. I was actually beaten up by multiple people when I was walking down the hallway for literally no reason. And my parents did everything that they could do, but the principals and the teachers just didn't seem to care enough, and nothing ever really got done to stop it. It was a terrible time for me, tragic and traumatizing, and I was scared. I hated going to school. I didn't want to be there. I honestly was depressed and afraid. It was very stressful and difficult for me. But when I got into the 9th grade, things changed. I got a new state of mind. I wouldn't allow myself to be bullied. And what I mean by that is I went crazy. I started fighting people. If I felt disrespected, I would go nuts, cussing them out, screaming at them, threatening them. I was constantly in trouble, getting in-school suspension, getting sent home. My parents were always being called. It got to the point where the school literally told my mom, your daughter is going to end up in jail. We don't know what to do. And they recommended sending me to an alternative school. My mom, however, didn't feel like that was the appropriate response, and she got me into therapy. Unfortunately, it didn't work. Honestly, my rage lasted for about 2.5 years, and I honestly don't even know how I had friends. I had a long time, but I finally realized that the reason why I was doing what I was doing was out of fear of ever having to be bullied and treated like that again. The fear of that embarrassment, the fear of that emotional trauma. I didn't want anyone to look at me as weak. I didn't want anyone to view me as someone to pick on or a pushover ever. So I just went crazy and I lashed out at anyone. And me doing that turned me into the people who bullied me. Even though it took years, I've changed and matured. And the therapy did start to help once I started realizing why I was acting the way that I was acting and that it wasn't changing anything. It was just making me into a monster. I guess the lesson of this story is just because someone does something to you.
One time in high school, I told my mom I was sleeping over at my best friend's house, so I dropped my phone off there and then I went to go hook up with a guy at his house. But I left super early the next morning because I had a job interview. And so I was getting ready for my job interview the next morning and my boob really started to hurt, so I looked in the mirror because your boob shouldn't hurt. And then I saw my nipple was hanging off and I put 2 and 2 together and I realized the guy I hooked up. So one time I had to be taken to the ER by my mom because I had a really bad migraine. When I got there, they gave me medication because I was throwing up. That medication made my heart race, so they had to bring out the EKG. They asked me if I was wearing a bra. I said no. They said, then why isn't this EKG reading? And I had to look at my mom and say out loud, nurse, does an EKG not work right if you have your nipples pierced? And my mom looked at me. She had no idea. I had them for a year and I kept it from her. And she found out because of a fucking migraine.
One time I went to the zoo, and one of the exhibits at this zoo was a big hole in the wall with no glass, just a hole with some branches and sticks, and a sign that said, in this exhibit is a giant spider. But apparently this one specific kind of spider would never leave its web, so they didn't even have to have glass on the cage. But guess what? When I looked in that exhibit, there was no giant spider. I even stuck my head in the cage to get a good look, and I couldn't find it. So when a zookeeper walked past, I was like, hey, zookeeper, where's the giant spider? And she looked around the exhibit and couldn't find it herself, and all she had to say was, that's weird. Excuse me, what do you mean that's weird? There's a giant spider on the loose. Call 911.
So when I was little, my mom took me and my brother to the local pool. I was 12, he was 4. So while my mom and I sunbathed, he played in the kiddie pool. When all of a sudden he comes up to us and says, Mommy, I gotta go pee-pee. And instead of taking him to the bathroom, my mom said, go pee-pee in the pool. Shame on you, Carolyn. We continued to lay out in the sun until all of a sudden we hear everyone scream. Oh my God, some kids peeing in the kiddie pool. Torian didn't understand, and he went over to the kiddie pool, pulled down his pants, and pee-peed like he was peeing in the toilet. But my mom is clever, and she pretended like she didn't know whose kid it was. And we never went back to that pool again.
I used to have this art teacher and everyone hated her. She was the biggest bitch, like she was literally so mean and strict, and for what? What was the reason? Anyways, one day she was really testing my limits and she had the motherfucking audacity to rip up and throw away a project I worked on for a week because she said it quote unquote wasn't good enough and that I never even try in her class. Even though I worked so hard on it and I did the best I could. I was mad at her for saying I didn't ever try and that my work wasn't good enough for her, so I was thinking to myself, shut your bubblegum dum dum skin tone chicken bone Google Chrome no homo flip phone disowned ice cream cone garden gnome extra. Chromosome metronome dimidome genome full blown monochrome student blown. Indiana Jones overgrown Flintstone X and Y chromosome friendzone Sylvester Stallone Sierra Leone AutoZone friendzone professionally seen silver patron big headed ass up. And out of anger I grabbed my backpack and said no, I am gonna leave. My way or the highway. And I stormed out of that ugly bitch's class and flipped her off on the way out. I deadass ran out of the school and walked all the way home since I lived close to the school. My mom asked me why I was home early and I told her what happened and she was surprisingly proud of me. So proud that she took me out for ice cream. I was suspended for 3 days for doing that, but oh well, fuck that bitch.
It all started when I received a message on Instagram from one of those bot accounts, and me being me decided to troll this account by texting him back trying to get a response. Conversation with this mystery bot account started off with me joking around, kind of teasing and mocking the account, to who at this point I thought was some automated message from some foreign country. I soon realised that this wasn't an automated message, but rather a real person. The person behind the account told me their name, which was Rahil. Over time the messages got weird to say the least. He sent a group photo of my friends and I, which he could not have got a hold of as my account was private. He even could point out who I was in the photo, even though the photo was kind of blurry and taken from afar. This set off alarm bells in my head. How could this random stranger recognise me from photos? But I still didn't take it seriously and sent screenshots of the conversation to my friend Kayla. Kayla instantly messaged Rahil, egging him on and sending him troll texts. Fast forward a month, I was at a sleepover with Kayla when Kayla got a text response from Rahil 1 month late. Kayla continued the conversation with Rahil, and over the texts he started hinting at things about Kayla like her dog's name, her family members and other things. We continued the conversation with Rahil, trying to get as much out as we could. That's when he texted me. He knew we were together. We tried to play it cool, but we were both slightly starting to panic. We tried to fool this Rahil, trying to misguide him what he knew about Kayla. We texted, "What's Kayla's brother's name then?" He responded, "No, silly. Kayla has a sister, Anna, and a dog, Coco. No brother." This information was correct. We were really starting to freak out now. Rahil could tell that we were getting worried and asked us, "Do you want to see what I look like?" We responded yes, and through came a photo of an unknown man whom we had never seen in our lives. We joked that he really didn't know anything about us, and that's when he texted an extensive paragraph about me. It started with my full name, where I was born, which primary school I attended, and which high school I attend. Then he said this: "I watch you walk to school every day with 3 others. I used to spy on the girls at your primary school. And write down their information and make notes of what they do, what times they leave, and how they live their lives. I tried to use this account to hack your account and hack all your information." What? He had been stalking us since we were like 8 years old. Kayla was freaking out and crying, but I tried to stay as calm as possible. The sound of the notification shocked us. There was a text from Rahil, "I'm so close, yet so far." We instantly screenshotted everything and reported his accounts to Instagram, to which Instagram removed. We couldn't really get any sleep that night, and spent the night deleting any people on my account who I didn't know. Fast forward 3 days. I felt the urge to tell someone, so I decided to tell my brother. He told me I think I should tell my mum. I went back to my room to think things through, and that's when my brother came into my room and yelled, "You just got pranked by the prank patrol." For a few seconds I was silent. Then I started crying, I guess tears of joy. Although I was extremely angry at my brother, I couldn't help but feel overwhelming joy as I heard that we didn't actually have a crazy stalker.
I've been practicing social distancing, but today I ran out of milk, so I went to go get some milk at Aldi. But then as I was walking to Aldi, a police officer drove by and I got kinda nervous until he drove past, and I thought I was okay until 2 minutes later when the same police officer drove by me. And I thought I was okay because he went past, but then 2 minutes later, he pulled up next to me and rolled his window down. And he said, "Ma'am, can I ask you a question? How old are you?" And I answered his question because he's a police officer, and I said 21. And then he said, "Ma'am, do you live around here?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm just walking to Aldi to get some milk." And then he said, "Can I ask you out to dinner? I just wanted some milk."
In my opinion, Miraculous is a tiny bit overrated. I mean, sis, don't get me wrong, I ain't no hater, but it's the same in every freaking episode. You know, someone gets angry, then they get acclimatized by Hawkmoth. Then Ladybug and Cat Noir come to the rescue and fight a little bit, What? And then Ladybug uses her, like, lucky charm, and then they win. Then Hawk Moth, at the end of every single episode, is like, I will get you next time, Cat Noir and Ladybug. Just you wait and see. Miss Girl! Well, it better be soon, Hawk Moth. It's been like 100 episodes, and you ain't even been close. Get your game face on. Get your game face on. He's a little bit of a bit.
Is it just me, or am I the only one, when I'm on YouTube, basically, an ad pops up, and it's Grammarly! So, basically, it goes, do you ever need help with your writing? Well, we got the... No! No! I don't need help! I've gotten through elementary school, okay? And I'm currently in middle school, so yes! Thank you.
Of high school, I had a good group of friends, but at the time, my group of friends started getting pretty toxic. Everyone would just pretty much talk about each other, and then the next day when we would all see each other, it would be like nothing ever happened. There was this one guy, his name was James. He was a football player. He was pretty cute. Most girls were pretty attracted to him, but he was one of my really good friends at the time, and one of my friends in the group, let's call her Lucy, I guess she had a really, really big crush on him, but I had no idea at the time. One day at lunch, James sent me a funny meme on Snapchat, and I said, oh my gosh, you guys, look, this is so funny. And I could see, like, Lucy, she was so mad, I could just tell, and I was just really confused why. And basically, all my friends took sign language. And I was the only one in my group that took Spanish. So Lucy started signing. She was just signing like crazy, and I can tell she was really mad. And one of the girls in the group who I was closest to, we'll call her Lily, I leaned over and I was like, Lily, like, what is she saying? Closest to, we'll call her Lily. I leaned over and I was like, Lily, like, what is she saying? Lily told me everything that she was saying, how I was trying to steal James from her and how I'm doing this on purpose, even though I had no idea at the time that Lucy did have a crush on him. And that night I was doing a Spanish presentation, so that's all I was focused on, and I get a text message from my friend. And she says, are you okay? Like, do you know what's happening? I text her back. I'm like, what's happening? And she ends up FaceTiming me about 5 minutes later. And she says, do you know, like, why am I in this chat? I was like, what chat? And she sends me a bunch of screenshots, and the chat is called We Hate Taya. And I was just speechless. And I looked through it, and she added all these random people that weren't even in our friend group. It was just a bunch of messages about me, and really, really hateful messages, and how I'm just trying to steal James, and how I'm annoying, and all this other stuff. I just feel sick to my stomach. I remember just sitting there, and I start screaming into the bathroom, and I ended up throwing up. My mom runs upstairs, and I just told her what happened. I'm crying hysterically. I was mentally just broken down. It was really bad. The next day, I felt pretty worthless, honestly. Like, I felt like I lost all my friends. Only one girl from the group stood by me. I'm a senior now, and Lucy's actually in my English class, but we're just acquaintances. I do forgive her, but I'll never forget what she did, and it'll always be there. And I'm on dance team now this year, and I have better friends now. So, lesson is, if you are in a group with friends and it's just getting really toxic, I suggest to just find better friends, because in the end, it's not worth it, because you will be dragged down with the negativity and the toxic energy that they bring.